Jews couldn't own radios, couldn't lock their gates at night, and had to wear, for a start, the yellow star.
I was sent home from school once a week that they were teaching the kids to hate us.
That was a very, very sad trip on a train. We were going and maybe I'm still going sometimes. And we arrived to Auschwitz.
It was very scary because a lot of the men were being sent away. My father's father was sent to a concentration camp.
Every day was a story. Every day was a survival.
I want to hear what they have to leave for everyone, and why are they telling all these stories to us? What is it important to let us know?
Good morning, 8th graders. This is an incredible opportunity to remember 6 million people who were killed, who lost their lives because they were Jewish. Names Not Numbers is a wonderful program. Over the next few months, you'll be meeting survivors who can testify about some of those 6 million people. Survivors who you will meet had the great fortune to pass on their wisdom to you, and their survival means something. If the death of one person is so meaningful in Judaism, then the life of each of those 8 survivors is so, so precious. It's very, very meaningful. It will change you in ways that you can't anticipate. And when you meet the survivor who you will be interviewing, remember, you will have the great fortune of passing their story on to your children and to the next generation.
The people that you're going to be meeting were probably your age when they were taken away from their families. How do they begin telling their stories? The problem was with 13-year-olds, or any age for that matter, beginning to tell where they're from and what happened to them, it was that nobody wanted to believe them. No one could imagine that in the 20th century, the most civilized country in the world, Germany, would be killing people. May 8th, 1945, the war's over. They went to their homes. What happened is, in most cases, they found no one at all, not even extended family. They also encountered an enormous amount of anti-Semitism by the people living in their hometown. Well, fast forward 15 years later, in 1961. And the one big name that escaped to Argentina was Adolf Eichmann. He's the big name behind and the mover of the final solution. The Israelis kidnapped Adolf Eichmann and they brought him to Israel to stand trial. But it's a prosecutor in that trial, his name was Gideon Hausner. He decided to bring 112 survivors to tell their stories. So now is the first time that they are going to be brought to the trial from all over the world and tell their stories. So not only are they talking, but the world is also listening. You are 71 years away from the end of World War II, have the great fortune to be able to be this last link, to be able to listen to the survivors tell their testimonies. You're going to hear a personal story, not something that you're reading in a textbook or seeing in a museum or hearing a lecture even on Yom HaShoah or in Kristallnacht. But in addition to that, you're also making history. You're having this opportunity to make a film. And your film will be the document, just like we had in the Eichmann trial, the witnesses telling their stories, and you're capturing all of this in your film. So what you are doing is not just an 8th grade project. You are making history. You're going to be telling the stories, and you can say, I had the chance to sit in front of a survivor, interview them, and make a film, and this is their story.
Liberation would mark the end of a 6-year nightmare through ghettos, deportations, slave labor camps, and forced marches. These are the memories of one of those survivors.
This morning we had the kickoff event for Names Not Numbers. We had the director of the program come in and speak to us, and we watched a video about a survivor.
Today we watched a video called One Survivor Remembers, and it was about a young woman who went through hardships during the Holocaust.
One thing that left an impact on me from the film was how she told the story of her father telling her to promise that she would never commit suicide, and how that came back to her right before she planned on doing it.
For the next couple of months, we're going to be bringing the survivors, interviewing them, learning how to use the cameras, and it's going to be bring back their humanity, and we're going to try to bring back their name, not their number.
We're at the Holocaust Museum, and we're here to learn about Jewish culture and what has happened in the Holocaust.
I like to think of you as the future Jewish leaders. So we, the older generation, look to you. That's why we've invested so much in you.
I have learned that the horrors that these people went through are so much more real than you can ever see if you were reading a book or watching a video, because you see actual artifacts and you see actual testimonials from survivors.
And I also didn't know that how seriously the Jews took the religion and how far they would go just to practice like Judaism and like learning from the Torah.
You will really carry the knowledge of the Holocaust forward. 100 years from the Holocaust, people will be questioning it. And up to you to know that it really happened.
It's hard to believe it before you come here, and then you come here and you believe it more.
I want you to understand that what you're about to do with these interviews is holy work. These are the people who went through the fire. They are going to give you what they often cannot give their own families, the gift of their story. You are now going to be that somebody else. That means you need to listen carefully, you have to hear what they have to say, you have to understand where they're coming from, and you need to know your stuff, because if you don't, they'll know that you don't.
I learned from the interviewing session that we have to be very warm to the Holocaust survivors, don't speak in a harsh tone, be very soft.
I learned also that we have to really get all the information out of them and get their stories, and don't let them go off topic and talking about just about the war. We want to hear their personal stories.
And ask conversation starters, not just yes or no questions, open-ended questions.
And you need to be prepared for any contingency in terms of emotional reactions from the Holocaust survivors, because you're never going to know when you're going to hit something and they might start to well up. When that happens, you take the box of tissues, you push it towards them and ask them if they'd like a break.
I got to learn how to work the camera and focus it and use the audio.
I've used like one of those small video cameras from 10 years ago. It was a really cool experience. Now I know how to actually use one.
I think I like the filming and the techie stuff the most. Just like learning about how to use them and different things about how to, like angles and...
I've used like an iPhone and a camera for pictures, but I've never used a video camera. I thought it was very cool to see how everything worked and how there are so many buttons, and to zoom in there are like 4 buttons. It's very impressive.
Taught us how to work the camera. We learned how to use the headphone thing so you can like hear it, the volume. I thought it was very cool. Like you have like one thing to use on sort of like the news.
I like cameras and professional equipment, and it just like feels powerful.
Today I'm feeling a little bit nervous, but I'm very excited to hear her whole story.
I'm interviewing Dr. Samuel Kay today. A little nervous because I don't know how he's going to answer the questions.
Today I'm interviewing Mrs. Varda and I'm feeling very nervous and excited at the same time.
Today I'm going to interview my great-grandmother, Mrs. Margaret Jeremias, and I'm very excited because I finally get to hear her full story.
Today I'm going to interview my grandmother, Marion Kornfeld.
I know that we are the last generation to be able to do this, and this is important, and we must do it. This is very special, and I hope it goes well.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Names, not numbers, Miss Ava Weiss, take one.
Go for it. RPRY, names not numbers, Zsa Braun Strauss, take one.
Names not numbers, Mr. Emil Siegel, take one.
Names not numbers, Mrs. Mermelstein, take one.
Good afternoon. My name is Hannah Clare. On behalf of the 8th grade students of RPRY, I'd like to thank you for participating in our Names Not Numbers program. What is your full name?
My full name is Regina Mermelstein. I was born in Czechoslovakia on May the 9th, 1928. I had 6 siblings, starting with the oldest, Esther Gittel, Moshe Mendel, Norsen, Rivka, Wolf, and Leah. My father's name was Menashe, and he was a cattle dealer. And he would go from cities to cities and buy some livestock and then go a market, for cattle, and he would be selling it there. My mother's name was Hannah. She was a home mom that did not get much education at all. We had an elderly grandfather living with us. That was my father's father, Shmuel Chaim. He had a nice beard, and he went for a walk, and there was a Hungarian station, and when he came back from his walk, he had no beard.
My name is Eva Weiss. My maiden name is Eva Barta, or was. I was born in Budapest, and I was an only child until after the war. My mother was a homemaker, and my father worked for a publishing company, for a newspaper, for a bank, depending where he could get a job. I was younger than you all here, and I went to kindergarten, elementary school. Before the war, I went to a yeshiva, and there I was one of the students. So I felt I belonged there. I was a good student. I loved going to school.
My name is Emil Siegel. I'm born 1929 in Poland, in Krakow. We have a bakery. The Polish bakeries come and they took the whole machinery from the bakery. We make Pesach. My father was very Orthodox. He was going to shul twice a day. We have Shabbos. We go to the shul, yes. And we ate, yes. We have kosher house.
My name is Marion Kornfeld. I was born in Kassel, Germany. And my birth certificate, where there's a swastika on it, people advised my parents and my mother in particular not to go to the hospital to give birth to me because a lot of anti-Semitism and she wouldn't be treated right. So I was born, as a consequence, I was born at home. When I was born, there was baby food available. My mother couldn't buy it. Jews couldn't get it.
Describe what your parents did for a living.
My father, well, he had to go to work at an early age, but he was very ambitious. He took business courses, and then he was a traveling salesman. He traveled all over Germany, and he also had a store, a shoe store and leather store right in Kassel, where he lived. And his ambition was to open a big store in Berlin.
Describe the anti-Semitism before the war.
There was always anti-Semitism, but it got much worse. When my father was traveling around as a salesman, they put a sign in one of the places, no Jews allowed, and he asked them, he said they were forced to put that sign on.
Margot Jeremiah. I was born in Heidelberg, Germany, 1926.
What were your parents' names?
Max Ganser and Caroline Ganser. I have one sister, she's older than I. We were living in a small place near Heidelberg where I was born. My father had a dry goods store. My school before 1933 was a public school. I went to school, I had no Jewish friends because I was the only Jewish girl child at the time, and I went to school, and it was a very nice school, very well attended, and I had a lot of friends in school. The relationship with the non-Jewish children was very good before 1933.
My name is Ernie Einzig. I was born in Hungary, Budapest, in 1922. My father was a peddler. He used to go sell utensils to eat with, dishes. Holidays, he used to sell toys. He used to go from one market to another, and he was carrying his own business. My mother was staying home and taking care of the children. I have 3 brothers, 4 of us, and 1 sister. I went to a Hungarian public school. We had Hebrew studies 1 hour a week. A Rebbe used to come into our class and taught us Yiddishkeit. There was very few Jewish people lived in my neighborhood.
Did you feel any anti-Semitism when you were in school or with your friends?
In school, I remember one of my teachers was a real anti-Semite. I remember this was a geography teacher, and one time I had to draw a picture of Europe. And I did my very best. I'm very good at drawing, and he didn't accept it. He said it was no good. So I went home, and one of my friends who didn't do homework wanted to have my picture, and for him it was good.
My name was Veronica Borta. I live in a very small town in Hungary. The name was Mátészalka. It was an Orthodox city. I born in 1924. March 27. My mother have 8 children, 5 daughters and 3 boys.
My name, Zsuzsa Strauss.
Where and when were you born?
In Hungary, 1927, June 20. My parents had smaller 8 children, and I was the youngest.
We have a store. We make handmade needlepoint, knitting, crocheting, and material. It's a Jewish elementary school in Mátészalka, only the elementary, 4 years. And after we have to go to the public school, but the public school with that paper, we don't have to go in Shabbos, but we can do nothing, just sitting there. But they don't let them to stay home, the children.
I was a young girl. I went to this school. This school was not Jewish school, but has Jewish children. The class was about 10 Jewish children. I went in the Jewish school until 10 years old.
And my father, my mother go to the store every morning, and we have an aunt who was a widow and stay with us whole day. Every store was closed for Shabbos. That was the rule. Even you are not Orthodox, Pesach, that was the biggest thing. We are looking for that so much, and was so much fun, and I still keep the Pesach like my parents did it. I do the old-fashioned way, you know that.
Did you notice any signs of anti-Semitism before the war?
Very strong anti-Semitism. In the school even. They don't like us. Jewish children.
My name is Dr. Samuel Kay. I was born on June 28, 1938.
Where were you born?
I'm not sure, but it was probably in Wrocław, Poland at the time. Now I believe it's Belarus. So when I was a little boy, as soon as I started speaking, I didn't speak one language, I spoke four. At home, we spoke Yiddish, and outside I spoke Russian, Polish, and Belarus. And the kids that I played with were kids. Although I did hear certain things as a child, which I will never forget. They were saying in Russian, "B'yei Zhidov spasai Rossiyu," which means, "Kill the Jews, save Russia." And that I heard very frequently. But of course, I didn't really know what it really meant.
When did the Nazis invade your town?
The Hungarians, they came to our house and they demanded that my father give them jewelry and money. I guess my father didn't have it or he didn't want to give it to them. So right on the threshold of our home, they beat him up. We had a guy who used to go in the middle of the town and he would call out whatever news there was, good news, bad news. And the message was that all the Jews should go to the school. We stayed in the school for a little while and we went to a big city. It's called Uzhgorod. And that's where we stayed 2 months maybe. And after that they put us on the trains.
I was an only child and my observations were my own because I was too young, so I wasn't exposed to what was happening in the world, and I was too young that my parents would discuss it with me. So I really became aware of it when the Germans marched into Hungary, which was in 1944 March. My father was taken away, like him and a lot of people I knew and family members, to forced labor camp. I really didn't know or understand that there was a world war going on, that Jews were taken to camps. I didn't know until it came very close to us. My mother was a loving and protective woman, and I was always next to her, and when my father was taken to the forced labor service, it was just my mother and I in Budapest, and my mother's whole family lived in a town called Papa, which had a large Jewish population, about 3,000 Jews, more than 10% of the population of the city. The men were missing because they were taken away. Most of them we never saw again, including my father.
People was moving from the place to place. We have not place to go. We was wandering. And later we saw the German soldiers. We was very far from Krakow, and we go back to Krakow to the house. The last time I saw my mother with my sister in Krakow ghetto.
How were your mom and sister killed?
They sent them with a ship to Stutthof, and they explode the ship, and they go. And they die. I was going with my father, and a lot of people was going to work there. They start to build factory from the Messerschmitt airplane factory for the German under the ground. And they never finished because the Russian was coming to the front. And we was sending us to Wieliczka, to Soul mine, and we was working there, and the German built factory for the planes under the ground.
What was the conditions in the salt mines?
Not so great, not so great. We was going hungry there, salt mine, we was going in the morning, and we was working the whole day. Later we go back to the concentration camp.
Kristallnacht was very traumatic. I went to school, as I usually did in the morning, and we had not known anything yet. And as I got into the train, there were people gleefully telling each other, oh, we had such a great time last night. We destroyed the Jewish homes, we destroyed the synagogue, and it was great. And I go into the train, I was really frightened that they would not know that I was Jewish. As I got to Heidelberg, I immediately heard the shouting, kill the Jews, down with the Jew, and I literally heard the glass shattering. Of course, I was very frightened. I didn't know what to do. And I was met by an elderly man, and he said, do not go to school. They are at the school right now, and they're all over destroying. They burned the synagogue last night and take the next train back home. I was 12 years old. I saw my father and other men carrying furniture. As I got close and I questioned my father, he said, they are at the synagogue, they're destroying it, they're throwing everything out. The synagogue had an apartment adjoining to the part of the synagogue where the Gabbai lived, and he had to move, and another Jewish home opened up for him to move to. So the men carried the furniture to go to this particular home. I got so frightened, I went home and I actually fainted. As the men came with the last piece of furniture, 12 SR men came to arrest the men. They walked them through the village to the municipal building and arrested him. My father was not allowed to come back home. He was taken to the concentration camp of Dachau. My mother went to a big city by the name of Karlsruhe. I don't know what she did, and she got him out. He was in World War I. Miracle by miracle, after 5 weeks he came home. Not the same man as he was before. Right after Kristallnacht, we got different ID cards. Every male was in Germany was named Israel. Every female was named Sarah, and the ID card had Jude stamped on it. We had to give away our jewelry, we had to give away money. Things just went from bad to worse.
When we got to Belgium, my father, he decided maybe we should go to France. We were on the front, bombs were falling, everything. We also were very lucky there because at one point so many people didn't get up, and my mother asked my father, what is this? Why aren't they getting up? He said, they're all dead. On the way to France, my mother met a woman with a baby carriage, and my mother begged her maybe she could put me in that carriage too. So she put me in the carriage, and my mother said, this carriage is so heavy, she could barely move it. So the woman said, oh, I have all my silver in here.
Was this woman Jewish?
Yes. She carried all her silver in the baby carriage. That's why it was so heavy. My father looked around for some place to live. He found a real old house, and he was afraid. You know, the landlady, he told her, you know, I'm Jewish. She said, oh, I don't care. So he told her, but what am I going to do? You know, it says on Jews at to register. She said, pretend you don't live here. Don't register, which was dangerous for her. But she let him go to that house. It was a very old house. We didn't even have a refrigerator, nothing. But my mother always told me all that didn't matter. It was the fear that mattered. The rest she could deal with. I was walking on the street with my mother, and a German soldier came over and tried to speak French to me because he figured that's what I spoke. It was in Belgium. So he tried so hard. Finally, I spoke out real loud. I said, oh, ich hab ne schöne Spange in der Haare. I have a very nice pin in my hair. So my mother, she almost fainted because he looked at her. He said, what is this? I tried so hard to speak French and she speaks German. My mother said he knew I was Jewish. How would I know to speak German? But he didn't do anything or say anything. But, you know, I didn't know. There was a barn, that building was a very old building, and this German soldier once came in, he was all drunk. So he had pictures of dead Jewish children, and he showed that landlady, oh, these are all dead children. He was laughing, that all that. Meanwhile, he got sober again, and she brought it up to him, and she said, you know, you showed me pictures of all these dead Jewish children. He got so scared, he went on his knee, he begged her, please. He said, don't tell anyone I said that because I'd be shot immediately. We just were very lucky that they didn't get to us, but they took away plenty of Jews. And some paid a lot of money to have false IDs where it didn't say Jews. My parents couldn't pay the money for that. And we had the real, it said Jewish by us. But even those who paid a lot of money to have false IDs, they were still caught. And it was just a matter that was Bashir that they didn't catch us, but we had many close calls. My father used to wear a working uniform, like he was a worker, and he carried tools with him, so not to be suspicious. So there was one day, they stopped every person on that street, every single person. When they got to my father, and he had it said Jewish on his ID. So when they stopped him, some German soldier, oh, he's probably one of the workers, let him go. So he was the only one, and he told my mother he was so nervous.
In 1942, we were in a ghetto, and they put barbed wire around part of it, and so the Jews had to live in that place. They couldn't move beyond the barbed wire. The good thing is that in the back of our house was a lake, and that came in very important in saving our life. I remember people coming into our house, taking our sugar and our salt. We had much less food, although we were not starving in the ghetto. We still have things to eat, but it wasn't like before. We were 3 or 4 or 5 families in one house. Life in the ghetto wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good. You know, you were, especially for a young boy who wanted to run around and do things, it was very limited, but they didn't do anything. But we had news came from other towns that the Germans was going around killing the Jews in certain towns. We know how we knew that, I'm not sure, but that's how the news came through.
Describe the day the Germans invaded your town.
March 19, 1944, I was in vacation in Budapest. My sister lived there. And we went to the soccer game, and all of a sudden, we saw so many airplanes, German airplane, and we don't know what's happened. And when finished the game, when I go home, I got a telegram from my father, don't move no place, stay there wherever you are. So I stayed there because my father said, right away they're collecting the young people and right away send them to Auschwitz.
What happened to your family when the Germans invaded Hungary?
When the German came in, of course the ghetto was there in Mátészalka. Few weeks later, they start to put them to the wagon and take them to Auschwitz.
My father was one of the organized the ghetto, so I was close to my parents, but they moved everybody, me and this, it was about 25 people or 30 people, because he has no place. So my father organized with other 2 people for they have what to eat. The people, this was 2 weeks and took it to Auschwitz. My father, he told me, if you're coming home, please tell to children, everybody never come to back this Hungary. Go away from this, what they did it for us. This I can tell you.
When did you leave Hungary?
I left Hungary just before the war started, in 1939 in April. Before I came to the United States, I know in Hungary, in the school, every day there was no anti-Jewish laws. One day you read that the Jews are not allowed to go to higher education. A Jew is not allowed to own any property. The Jews cannot be a doctor or a lawyer. What's the future for a Jew to live in a place like that? Pesach, on the boat, we had a Seder, and I got seasick. Father was supposed to come with me, but in January he passed away. I say Kaddish every night for my father, and I only had my mother with me. My brothers were all living in America. I came from Hungary.
Describe your feelings when you were drafted into the Army.
I was very glad to be in the American Army. I know if I become a soldier, I'm healthy. Why I gonna be in the American Army? Because that's the reason I left, to get rid of all those Germans. When I became a soldier, I hardly spoke English yet, but they took me anyway. First, they put me in a company that was all refugees, all Hungarians and Austrians. They changed their mind and they put me in a 47th Infantry. You don't think about your family when you're in the army, especially when you go overseas to fight the Germans. Get about the family and you fight for your life.
That was a very, very sad trip on a train. We were just going and going and going without any stop. I don't remember stopping any place, and there was no reason for it. So we just went. If you had to go to the little girl's room or something, there was no such thing. You just did it right there and then where you were. There was no stops. We were going and we were going, and maybe and we finally arrived, and we had no idea where I am or where we are. Everybody together, young, old, teenagers, and we arrived to Auschwitz. And then a Nazi came and he took my hand and pulled me away from my mother. That's the last time I saw my mother, and her last words were that she wanted to save me, she is mine, but they took me away anyway. And after that, they took us into on a truck, the people who arrived on that train, and they took us to a place. They undressed us and they shaved us. We just looked at each other and we didn't recognize anyone. And after that, they gave us some clothes with stripes, and they put us back on those pickup trucks, and they drove us to our lager in Auschwitz. Say lager, block 26. That was my home there for a while, and they had bunk beds, and I was on the third bunk. I didn't know anybody. There was people from all over the country, and we had to stay every morning on a say lapel, that a countdown. We lined up 5 people in a row, and the Nazi went every morning to look how we look. If we look like we're a little bit sick, then he pulled you out. Or if you resembled like you are sisters, he broke you up and he took one away. And that's what happened to my cousin. He took one out and the second one ran after her, so they both got exterminated.
After the salt mines, where'd you go?
To Flossenburg. They took us with the train. I remember we have no water, no food. We slept. That was one bed for hundreds of people. I have no name, only call my number. I need to answer the number. When I don't answer the number, they start to beat me, because the Jewish people where we was, they was going hungry, no water, no food, and they put them completely down.
Why didn't anyone fight back against the Germans?
Because the Jewish people, the German was very strong. Everybody was afraid from them. I don't believe nothing in the war time, because I was too busy with everything, with the German.
What kind of shoes did you wear?
Shoe I was wearing, on the top was leather and wood. On the sole was wood. Nobody know what going on. We was walking. They sent us to some place to kill us.
We had to wear
like overnight. We had to make and sew yellow stars on our clothes and wear them all the time on the street. If somebody was caught without it, they were imprisoned, punished, shot, whatever. The next thing was we were moved to the ghetto. You can pack up enough clothing for in a suitcase, and then you had to move to a designated area of the city which was surrounded by wooden planks, and you couldn't enter unless you had some ID and the guards let you through. This was an area of the town which was predominantly Jewish anyhow, so the other families who were moved in, maybe 5-block area, they crowded about 2,000 people or more. The communication between the Germans and inhabitants of the ghetto went through few chosen people. They wouldn't even talk to the Jews, they just relayed their instructions. We stayed there about 6 weeks. From there, we were taken to a factory, a large fertilizer factory. We stayed there maybe a week. The people from my city, men, women, children, were put into the wagons and taken away. Nobody knew where to. I was part of a group. We were told we are going somewhere else. There was a group of people selected by a man named Kastner who were supposed to go to then Palestine through Switzerland. We did not go with the other wagons. We went in a separate car to Budapest. We called it a camp. It used to be a place for blind and deaf-mute Jewish children, but it became a place for people from different cities who were destined to go to Palestine.
In 1940, on Holocaust Sukkot, November 22nd, my parents were told not to let me go to school because school had reopened after several months, and I should stay home. We realized something bad would happen. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the SR man came and said you have 2 hours to pack 2 suitcases and to be at the municipal building. You should take some food, but no, you can't have any jewelry, you can't have any money. When we got there was a bus waiting for us with other Jews in it already. We were taken to Heidelberg to the train station where they had a train waiting for us. My parents had to sign over all our property and we were put into the train not knowing where we would go. In the train, every 5 minutes somebody would call out and say, if you look out the window, you get shot. If you have jewelry, you get shot. If you have money, you get shot. My father had some jewelry that he had hidden away. I made him throw it out of the train. I was so frightened. We ended up in France, and there we were taken out of the train into trucks to go to a concentration camp by the name of Gurs. So I was in this concentration camp. I was in a children's barrack. We slept on a piece of wood. I had one friend. We slept with 2 blankets under 2 blankets to keep warm.
Describe a day in the camp.
We did not have to work. This was not a work camp. We would get 3 times a day. We would get some dirty soup to eat, and we were basically left on our own. There was really nothing to do there. We were kids, and we were in the barrack together and just were frightened because we were not with our parents.
My mother was in the early 20s. She started speaking about making a hiding place under the house. And finally they started listening. And so what they did is after they came from work, they started digging under the house. And it was dug in the form of an L. Went like this and like that. And then one night in June, I believe, I was woken up saying that the Germans are going down the street and picking up the Jews. So we all took whatever we could and we ran outside and we went into the entrance. Now the entrance was closed with a big box, and they moved it over the hole, and no one knew there was anything there. Of course, we could not speak, and I cannot cry, because if I cried, it'd give everybody away. In fact, a very sad thing happened there. We had a baby in there who was only a few months old, and the baby cries, and the parents put a pillow on the baby's face. And when they took off the pillow, the baby was dead. But of course, things were different, We were all trying to save our lives. So we were in there for about 2 weeks. And we realized that we stayed there long enough, they'll probably find us. So it was decided that we have to leave. In October of '42, we were sitting at the edge of a forest and eating whatever we could eat. And lo and behold, the Germans came, and we saw them. We left everything behind, and we ran. And the only casualty was one of the men who, as he ran, he lifted his hand and he got shot in his pinky. From time to time, we would encounter the Russian partisans, and that was a good time for us because they had food, they had real food. They were not too happy with Jews. But again, from time to time, we couldn't stay in one place long enough. 6 to 8 months before we were liberated, with 2 drunk Russian soldiers who came, and when they found out that we were Jewish, they said, "We're going to shoot us." And I ran up to them, and I said to them in Russian, "Please, don't shoot us." And they said, "What's the difference? You're only Jews." And my mother said to me, "If you hear the first shot, you run." But as it turned out, a group of Russian soldiers, the head must have been a general or something else, but he came in and he basically disarmed the Russians, and we were saved.
I was only 1 day in Auschwitz. I did some mistake. This Mengele came and take me from there, and I saw my mother face. She's scared so much, and I went back to my family. He came again and gave me a hug, big. So I saw my mother's face. I never forget my life. But same night, took it us, this transport put me, and take it for Poland in Plaszów. This was a big ghetto. This is the ghetto for Krakow. So suddenly came inside a guy and screaming, "Where you came from Hungary?" And he asked, "Has somebody?" "Yes, yes, somebody, a girl from the family." I ask you, who you are? "My wife, this your mother cousin." So who was this? This guy was with his son, and he tell me, "What is this here?" He said, "You will work very hard, this place." This ghetto, Plaszów, and my relative helped me a lot. After he came to me, "You have to go out because the Russian here," and I thought, "Where you going?" "I can't tell you, but we will leave." And take us back to Auschwitz. Auschwitz all the time have to be stay long time. Block 2, stimuje. Block 1, stimuje. Stimuje, this is the counting all the time, again counting, again counting.
How did it feel when you found out you were going back to Europe?
I was glad, in a way. I didn't have no trouble in the army. I don't think there was any anti-Semites in the company that I was in. When I told them I was Jewish, they said, "Oh, you're not Jewish, you're Hungarian." I spoke a little Yiddish, so that's like German, so sometimes I was like an interpreter. I was trained in America to be in infantry. When I was sent overseas, they put me in a cannon company. Now, when I first heard I'm in a cannon company, I didn't know what it was, a cannon company. I never heard of it. I thought maybe I'm going to put fruits in the cans. When the lieutenant telephones back to the cannon company that we got a target to shoot, you will find out how far is the place that you have to shoot at, so they know exactly how to elevate your gun, and then you load. I was the loader. I put the thing in a case that goes into the gun.
How did you earn a Purple Heart?
When I was loading and I cut my cut my finger, that was my worst thing that ever happened to me during the war. We were in Germany during the snow and winter. The war stopped and it was so cold for about 3 months. And we slept in the foxholes. We dug deep down in the ground. And if you take off your shoes, your feet would freeze and you wouldn't be able to put it back. So nobody took off their shoes for I don't know for how long. I was hiding behind a tree and looked down, and there was the Germans. The first thing I did is took my dog tags and throw it away, because if they find out that I'm Jewish, I'm certain going to be shot.
What did you eat during the war?
My mother gave away everything for food. She bought towels and sheets. She gave everything away just to get food. And some of the neighbors helped. You know, at one point, my mother was so weak, she gave everything to me. So a doctor told her, you know, you're not a good mother. What would your child do without you? My father used to go to a grocery store, and when she cut the cheese, little pieces of cheese fell out. So my father begged for those little pieces that fell off.
Can you describe your story with the Megillah?
In Belgium, there was a man, all I know his name was Yossel. He was still a young man, he wasn't married there, and he had no family at all. And sometimes he came to my parents and he ate by whatever my mother cooked. And he had this old Megillah, and he said it was his uncle's Megillah. So my parents kept the Megillah because he was actually, they caught him in Belgium and he was sent away and he died in the Holocaust.
Do you know during what time period this Megillah was written?
That I don't know if they can prove what time. I don't know. Megillah can be about 200 years old.
I have a friend, when the German came in, he said, they're coming the ghetto, because already Poland and Czechoslovakia, they already was there. And you can go in, because that's no good, that's kill yourself. You have to change and take a Christian paper. And I said to him, I can do it. That we are so honest. If you don't do it, you will have problem. So he bought for me a paper, and my name changed, of course, for that name. First, I went to make a maid for a woman who don't have children, and she'll have somebody to stay with. Maybe 2 months I was there, and after I get the paper, I go into the factory like a worker. But we have a problem when we're coming the Yontev or something. I have to work, and sometimes I said I have to have some problem at home, and the other woman said, she's Jewish. I said, don't tell that, you know, because only the Jewish holiday I have a problem. The young people there, young lady, where is your star? Because the Jewish people have to wear star. Is my star up in the sky? My name was the Christian name, and I had a Catholic religion. I went to study, but they asked me something. And the oldest brother, he went to Auschwitz, and the youngest brother was coming to see us in Budapest. And my sister said, Shai, don't go back. We give you a paper like we have it. And he said, no, I couldn't do it. And he went back. Unfortunate, he got it.
How was life as a Jew in the convent, and how did you feel about being Jewish and going to church?
Originally, when I was in the convent, I had to go to church in the morning. But in the convent, we were older girls, and so we had to do housework. Basically, what we had to do very often was peel apples, because they ate a lot of applesauce. And so we would eat the peels, because the food there was scarce. So I ate a lot of apple peels, and I still do today. I was a teenager, and I would not participate the way I should have. I was too old to let them try to convert me, but not old enough to really make believe. So it was kind of hard. First convent I was in 2. And the first one I was in, I was there only for a short while. was on Yom Kippur, and actually I was able to fast that day. There were nuns. There were nice people, but it became difficult and it became dangerous for us to stay there. The Jewish people who took care of the children had to come and bring ration cards and pay them, the convent, for us to stay. 1 month nobody came to pay, and the nun said, if nobody comes, you're out. And the following month, the lady that always came, and we said, what happened? So this person who was supposed to come that month was caught by the Germans, actually got killed, but before they could get things out of him, all the papers he had on him, he actually ate, so we, the kids, wouldn't be found. So it was a dangerous life all over. After I left the convent, I went to a French family as their maid. They had 6 children, took care of their household and their children. But after a few weeks, they realized I was not your usual type of a maid. People were very nice to me, and the children too, they respected me. As a matter of fact, the day I left their house to go back into a children's home, the older son took me to the train station to say goodbye to me.
Did they know you were Jewish?
I assume the parents did, but they did not know much. They did not know my background. The day I left them, as I said, the older son and the father took me to the train station, and that's when I told them who I really was. I kept in touch with them, and actually was in touch with them in this country yet. After the family, I went to a children's home again.
When I went to the ghetto, my city, my father found for me especially shoes because he thought take it for me to work will be a good shoes. And I went the shoes in Auschwitz. And some saw the shoes, this was very nice shoes. A German girl working there saw the shoes, they have taken it down. But not only some shoes, it was the principal was for the block. She saw me with those shoes, and she went and bring for me from wood something. It was woody done, and the shoes, and I thought this is not enough big. Don't worry. It was the broadcaster was a Jewish girl, but was the principal for the block. She went again and bring for me excellent. This was wood and top was, I don't know, material or plastic, whatever. I could close. It's coming to winter. I have this, but have the mark all my life.
Were you able to keep any Jewish customs when you were in the camp?
It was the girls was very religious, and she can pray without book, and we pray together. She tried to bring Jewish life to what she want to be.
Budapest was the capital of Hungary at the time, and it was the last place on the Germans' list from where they deported the Jews, what they called Judenrein in German, which means Jew-free. And by then, which was the end of July, there were no Jews left in the countryside. They were all taken to Germany, except people were hiding all over. There were people who put on Nazi uniform and acted as Nazis and went to where the Jews were put into wagons and barked orders in German and tried to save small groups of Jews. Jews were in hiding with Christian papers. I had the luck, 10 of us children who went to Budapest, and we survived in various circumstances. Hungarian Nazi group took over, and that's when they put the remaining Jews of Budapest into the Budapest ghetto, where I had the pleasure of surviving the rest of the war. So I was in 2 ghettos, once in Papa and then in Budapest. And all this happened in part of 1 year. And then the war was over. So this was one part of my life which basically it happened in 1 year, and it affected me for my whole life.
Describe the day you were liberated.
Oh my gosh, that was something very special. We were liberated with the American soldiers, and we were very fortunate. We were supposed to be exterminated like a few days before we were. The Americans outsmarted the Germans. The Germans were supposed to come like 2-3 days later because they were going to pour gasoline around our barracks and we would have all burned down. But the Americans arrived earlier and we were liberated. And for 24 hours, the guys who liberated us gave us permission to go to every home we wanted to and take whatever we want, because all those homes were empty. They ran away because they lost the war.
Could you please describe what liberation was like?
It's hard to know from my point of view. You know, my parents were excited, but they were very upset. They knew their whole family was killed, except my mother had 1 brother left, and my father had a brother and a sister left. All the others, there wasn't even a grave for them. Had we stayed in Germany, my mother and I and my father, my mother said we wouldn't have been alive for sure. I would have been one of those 1.5 million children that were killed. There was no way I would have been alive after that. I remember after the war, there were English soldiers and American soldiers, so we used to take a trolley and go by a camp where all the soldiers were, and they shared their food with us. They gave us food.
What did you do after Flossenburg? Did you just leave, or?
They take us from the Dead March, we was on the Dead March, and to forest. And the Germans started to talk, they know the United States Army is coming. They tell us, my kids. And later, I never saw the German, and I was walking. I was walking by myself to the street, and I saw tanks was going. On the tank was the star of the United States. I was thinking that it's Jewish star. And later they threw us food. I started to move. My father was killed. He cannot walk. 8 hours before the United States Army came. When the war finished, I was maybe 14 or 15 years old.
We were liberated in France already in August of 1944. And that was a day that everybody celebrated. When the war ended, they celebrated by having shrimp. But anyhow, it was something we don't eat, but I ate one and it tasted terrible. After the war ended in 45, we had some kids come and some people come from Auschwitz to the home. And I was in charge to find the bedding and the welcoming kit for them. I actually went into the woods to find flowers for them. And the first time I saw a flower, I was ecstatic. I hadn't seen a flower or anything grow in 1.5 years. And that, to see a flower, was something very special.
The adults decided that there was no place to live, because to live under the Russians wasn't that much better than to live under the Germans. And we slowly made our way towards actual Poland. And we went into Germany. There was a big shed, and as children we'd go looking around, and we went in, and the shed was filled with paper money. It turned out to be German money. But of course we were kids, we had no idea, so we didn't do it. When we came to Germany, we realized we could attain and been very wealthy. Germany was in ruins, and we made our way to the American zone. Life in the DP camp was very good because we had plenty of food. Each one of us got a ration. And my mother was a nurse in the infirmary, so she got an extra ration. So for two of us, there were 3 rations.
When and how did you find out that the war was over?
January 16, I think, when it's liberated, and we're sitting, of course, we don't go no place, and sitting my sister and my friends, we're sitting like usual, and all of a sudden, we hear a big motion outside. We don't know what's that. And we're looking outside, and there's so many army men, and I said, what's happened? Right away, I was in Budapest. We went down to Máté Szalka to find out what's happened with my parents. And of course, we don't find nobody there. This was not an easy thing, but God was with us, whoever survived.
Where did you go after you were liberated?
We were in some place because we was free, 8 people, and we walked. It was mountain, this was Czechoslovakia, so, and we don't know what to do when we're free. Suddenly coming a very nice car, sitting inside, and a big officer Russian stopped there and asked, who you are? Nobody can speak Russian, but they speak French. The guy was speaks French, a lot of Russians speak French. And he told them, we don't know what to do. We are stay here, and the Russian army, we don't know, even know we can go, no here, not there, we don't know what to do. He take by the car, bring us the place when was controlled already with the Russian police. And we were there about 3 weeks, and after was already organized the city, we went out and continue walking until I got to Hungary. I went to Budapest looking, it was writing there, everybody who is alive and came back. And there I found the name, my sister, 3 sisters' name, they are living. And I went to the city where they was.
We knew that the Russians were not far. They were about to break through and liberate Budapest. In January, they came from cellar to cellar from the neighboring buildings, and they broke through and they came in and they said in Russian, whatever, you are free. And there was a Russian truck with soldiers on it. 2 things. My first impressions, they threw in the snow bread. It was a terrible tasting bread, nevertheless, after weeks of not eating first piece of bread. I still wore on my coat the yellow star. A Russian soldier came with like a sickle in his, it's like a small sword or something, and he approached me. I was backing up. I thought he was going to cut my head off, or what do I know? And he grabbed me and cut off the yellow star.
I was proud to be a Jew, proud to fight to the end. My mom didn't know that I was in the army for 32 months. I didn't want her to know. So I used to write letters to my brothers and for my brothers, and my brothers used to tell my mother that I'm in Fort Dix and here, and she never knew that I went overseas.
Describe the things that you saw when you first entered the concentration camp.
When we were in Germany, we were sent to Dachau. In Dachau, I saw the gas chambers, and I saw the Jewish people, like you never want to see them, skinny like a bone. The truth is, I thought I'd never forget it, but I did forget a lot. I don't know. I don't remember how bad it was, or maybe I don't want to remember, I don't know. First thing I did is take off my uniform and change to my civilian clothes, and I never wanted to put it on again.
So the question that I want you to think about right now in this Emunah session is, how could it be? How can someone continue believing in Hashem after experiencing the kind of horrible things that you have been interviewing your survivors about this week? Yes, it is true that some people who went through the Holocaust did lose faith. And how can we judge that? Because we have never been through what they experienced. But the truth is, most did not. These are positive people. Yes, they could choose to dwell on the past, on the bitterness, on the sadness, but they have built upon that. And they have whole lives, they have had many years after the Holocaust to build and to grow, and they dwell on that as well. They don't dwell on the sadness. There was a very famous Holocaust survivor who died this year, named Elie Wiesel. Maybe you've read some of his works, I don't know. But Elie Wiesel, he wrote a lot about faith in God and how his faith had been shattered. But ultimately he wrote, "I have not lost faith in God. I have moments of anger and protest. Sometimes I've been closer to God for that reason." Elie Wiesel has spent his lifetime struggling with how to deal with belief in Hashem, which he never really lost, and acknowledgement that if Hashem runs the world, how could he have let this happen?
I was nervous this morning because I didn't know how she would react to certain questions, if she would get emotional, how I would deal with it. I think she's a very strong person to be able to have gone through all of this and still be able to talk about it. I was impressed.
I feel very special that I was able to interview the survivors, because I'm going to be like the last generation who's going to be able to, and this is like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
I felt that this was going to be a really amazing thing because I know that we are like the last generation who's going to be able to speak to these Holocaust survivors, and so I was very happy that I would be able to interview them and make a movie that would be able to show to people.
I don't want this experience to be over. All the steps on the way here, I was very nervous, but then once we got to the point, I really enjoyed it. Watching the video is not the same as being here interviewing. I am so glad I had this opportunity. I want other people to see this and do what we've done.
Even though we don't really want to remember the hardships of our fellow Jews, books and videos are nothing like the eyewitnesses. So it's better if we learn it from the eyewitnesses than from books and movies.
What is your message to our generation?
Remember and tell the story, and don't look at it as something that happened centuries ago and once upon a time, because it wasn't such a long time ago, and make sure that it never happens again.
Well, there is a lot of messages. Just be yourself. Do what your heart requires. Cherish your parents and everybody else around you. It's much easier to live that way.
No word for that, how they can do it, to make it people putting to the gas together and kill for nothing because they born Jewish. It was a terrible thing. And unfortunate, it's a big anti-Semitism now too. All the time when I see something, I hear it, it's come back what we did.
This is unimaginable, the unthinkable, how human beings, like the Nazis, could act that way. It's just, I don't know, there's no words for it.
They have to be happy and glad, they have good family, and they can get everything what they want.
It feels nice to hear about a survivor's story, but I would also want to interview more survivors and hear more about others.
Because we don't know why this happened for us. I don't know. Today I think about what happened when 6 million Jewish people killed this. Why? What happened? Why? When you can go to Israel, just go. This is the life there. This I can tell you. I'm sorry to my sister and the parents. All the children want to live in Israel. They are happy there. It's a different life.
You should never, ever take anything for granted, because these survivors, they went through the worst of the worst. We take a lot of things for granted that back then they didn't have the privilege to have what we have.
I call myself a Holocaust victim because I don't think I really survived. Because survival means you get back to where you were, okay? Because the Holocaust is with me. You're now living in an era where some people say the Holocaust is all made up. It's never happened. You need to be strong, and you need to be Jewish, and you need to know what you're talking about.
How thankful I am for how they could tell their stories and how it teaches us to be thankful for everything that we have, and like everything is a gift.
Well, you shouldn't forget what happened. You should remember all these people. I'm probably the last generation that are survivors. You should be vigilant too against anti-Semitism, and you should, at least the United States is a free country. There may be some anti-Semitism too, but it's not like in Europe where it was part of the government.
The filming is like really cool, and it's really cool to know how to do that and say that you made a documentary, but more I just wanted to know that my survivor's story.
This is the actual person telling us, not just reading from a book that you can think of, like you can picture in your head, but this is like real.
I was very excited about meeting a Holocaust survivor. It's great that they feel comfortable telling us their story.
My message to your generation is be aware at all times what's happening around you. Be kind to people. Don't judge anybody by their skin or their color or their religion. But basically be very aware of what's happening around you in the world. And be vigilant and be kind.
I think it was what he didn't say, meaning that he didn't want to share it because it was such a horrible thing that had happened. It's hard for him to talk about it. And I think that means a lot to the people who listen to it. And when they do share their story, it's very hard for them. And I understand that, and it's something that unfortunately they aren't going to be with us later on. And so we need to get their stories now while they are here.
Learn to be a good Jew, learn to be a mensch, take with you whatever you learn so you could teach your children to be like you like to be. I saw what happened to them in the concentration camps, so I could just imagine what happened to them. And if they survived, they are all special people.
Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
We are Rachel's children, and we carry her name. We are Rachel's children, and we light her flame. We see her strength, her dignity. We know her sacrifice. We are Rachel's children, calling her name. We are Rachel's children, and we bear her pain. We are Rachel's children, may it not be in vain. Buried alone, Bethlehem Road, no peace within her soul. We are Rachel's children, crying her name.
I really want to thank them for coming and giving us this chance to meet them and hear their stories. I'll appreciate more that I have my family, my health, and my right to practice my religion as I choose.
Thank you for really telling your story, because it's not easy for them to just come over here and sit for 2 hours talking to us.
I would thank them for participating in our program, because it was really special to have them be involved in our program and for us to be able to hear their story.
To all the survivors who spoke to us and who came out to talk to us, I just wanted to say thank you, because it means a lot to me, and I'm sure to everyone else who got to hear their story, that they took their time to spend it with us and to talk to us and go through this whole process just to tell us a story.
I would also want to tell them how amazing they are that they were able to go through the Holocaust and that it didn't break them, and that they're still here in mind and in spirit.
Thank you so much, first of all, for sharing your stories with the grade. I mean, we know how hard it was for you, but just know that now that we can pass this on generation that we met somebody.
That they're very brave and that they should be happy, because now they can share their story and the whole world can know about it. I would thank them for coming and tell them that they did really well of telling their story.
I'd like to thank them, first of all, for helping us do the Names Not Numbers program.
I would like to tell them that I know it's hard to share your story, and I know it must be horrible what you've been through, but we really appreciate it for coming and for sharing your story, because now we can pass it on, and we hope to continue your legacy and to continue what you created for us.
Thank you for coming and for sharing your story. I couldn't imagine what it must have been through to live through something like that. And I'm glad that you all turned out the way you are and where you are, being able to come and be interviewed by us for our project.
I would like to give them a big round of applause and say thank you so much for coming, and give them a lot of respect and kudos almost, because just what they've went through to come here, share it with us, and to allow us to almost live what they went through is tremendous. So I'd really like to say thank you to all of them.